welcome to Paperback Flick. I'm Rae Davidson.
I'm Ruth Craddock.
Whichever side she's on tonight. And we have a special guest. This is Erin, my daughter. And I did not realize it when I suggested Matilda, but this is one of her very favorites.
That's
so
good.
I have a couple questions for her. Like, Erin,
Yes.
what do you like better? So we've got the book by Roald Dahl. We've got the movie from 1996 that is just the regular movie. And then we've got the musical that's relatively new to me anyway. What one was your favorite?
Musical.
The musical. Okay. And what made it your favorite?
All the songs.
That's fair. And what do you like the best about Matilda? What makes it your favorite? Her friends?
How she still has like nice friends, and the librarian is still nice to her.
Yeah, there are still nice people, even in this world that seems like it's full of rotten stinkers.
Mm-hmm.
That are spoiled. That's what she just said. All right. Do you want to look right in the camera and say anything else about Matilda?
Our parents are bad.
Parents are bad. Do you wish that you had powers like Matilda?
Parents, yes.
I bet so.
Are your parents better?
All right.
Yes. Your parents are better?
I hope so.
Better say that. Okay. They're like,
are we better?
No, I'm
all right. Are y'all set?
Potato head.
All right. Go ahead. Thank you, Erin.
Hi, Erin. Thanks for joining us.
Bye-bye. All right. Oh, sorry. My light is a little ridiculous today.
You went from moody to like, hey, now you're in a cave.
All right. Yeah. now I'm just in like a dark cave.
Well, you represent the dark side of Matilda's life, and I represent the happy part of Matilda's life. Although school's also kind of bad for her, so you're home and I'm the school.
I kind of liked when Erin was like, "You're doing Matilda? I want to talk," and I was like, "You just want to be on the show," but actually, she kind of identifies a little bit like Matilda. She has had some problems at school, not necessarily with like the principal or teachers, but just to where school was a bad place for her for a long time. And then she would come home and we didn't know. And so she would be like, "I had a bad day." And I'm like, bad days happen.
Yeah.
And then she eventually was like, "I'm at a breaking point. I'm 6 years old," So it was when she found Matilda, she kind of identified with her. So
yeah,
I didn't know that.
Wow.
But
cool.
Anyway,
and that's what
so
our books.
I have done that in the past, not with Matilda, but I have done that where I kind of read a story that I'm like, this feels like my story, so I get that. But I actually, so when I was thinking about doing this, I looked into Roald Dahl's kind of backstory. So he did Matilda. He's got Charlie and the Chocolate Factory and BFG, the Big Friendly Giant, witches. Yeah. All of them seem to be like, adults are horrible. And so I kind of wanted to see, like, did he have some kind of tragic childhood past? I couldn't find anything like that.
Okay.
And so I was like, interesting. Most people write what they know to a degree. But apparently in his case,
he never really grew up. Or maybe he really doesn't like being a rat. So he wants to go back to when you're the kid. And that's why he writes kid stuff.
Maybe so. I don't know. He fought in World War II. And he was a pilot for the Royal Air Force. And he was like in Washington, D.C. As a liaison or something for the Royal Air Force when he started writing. He wrote like a short story and then from there started doing all these. And so maybe it was kind of a hail back to innocence or something. Like, I don't know. I everything that I found out about him, I'm like, how did he make these like perfectly child understandable stories?
Yeah.
As a ace fighter pilot type, like, I don't know. It didn't seem to jive, but that's kind of cool.
Yeah, I thought it was really interesting as I started noticing like all these books were by the same guy. I was like, wow, I didn't realize this was one. Like, he wrote that and he wrote that. And I was kind of like, well, this is really impressive because they're really good. And they're very quirky, but they have their own kind of personalities. But they're very unique and they're iconic, really. Like Charlie and Chalk Factory. That is one of the most iconic stories there is. Witches is huge for me because I've always loved that story. I'm a big fan of the Angelic Houston version of the movie. Right. It's impressive. It's an impressive body of work. When you look at it, you're like, wow.
So Matilda specifically, the reason that I wanted to do it was because I felt like there's a point in everybody's life that we all feel like Matilda. Like, we all feel like at some point that our parents are against us. And I like that it says in the beginning of the book, it's like, parents are always like, oh, my baby's a miracle, or, my son is so amazing. And usually they're not. They're just mediocre or whatever, And Matilda's parents were not like that. And I'm like, I promise in every person's life, they have a time that they're like, my parents don't understand me. My teachers are awful, like there's that one person that they're like, you're the only person I like, like Miss Honey, like all of us have that at some point, and probably all of us wish that we could will something to fly across the room or whatever. Like, I think all of us, at least most people that I have ever known, fantasized or like convinced ourselves that we had like some kind of superhuman ability, So the fact that Matilda actually does,
that's
pretty cool.
Real quick question. What would be your superpower if you had one?
I don't know. I used to always say that I could read people's minds, but the more I think about like the more I grew up, the more I'm like, oh, I don't want to do that. No. But there is one of the other books that I was reading. It's kind of like telekinesis, but like with a touch, you're able to change the gravity of what you have touched. So like for this, if I let go of it, but I tell it that is down, then gravity will pull this down to my ceiling. And you can essentially fly like that because you like tell your body that, oh, gravity's pulling you this way. Now gravity's pulling you that way or whatever. And so I was like, yeah, that's cool.
That's cool.
I can see that. Either that or healing touch. That's the other one that I think is cool.
Yeah, that's good. I would think travel. If I could just think and I'd be there, I'm all about that. So, you ever see the movie Jumper?
Yeah.
It's essentially that. I would like to be able to do that. That would be pretty awesome.
That is a cool one.
I do like walking, but sometimes I just want to get right there and not have to worry about it.
Yeah.
If I could go to the grocery store and just like take all my stuff straight to my house, like, boop, that'd be ridiculous.
That would come in handy.
All right.
Kids are late for school.
So yeah, back to the book.
So I also like, just for the book's sake, that it's kind of an easy read. Like,
yeah, that was nice.
Yeah, a few evenings that I could dedicate a little bit of time to reading it, and it's pretty quick to get through.
Yeah, I like that too. I also like the way it started. I thought that was a really clever way of introducing this story. I think it's funny you say that Erin identifies with Matilda, because I kind of do too, a little bit. Mainly, like, what I identify with is the sense that she's used to being in a bad family and a bad family life, but she gets kind of used to it and just accepts that that's what it is until she goes to school and somebody woke up. Is it Lucy? Yeah, you gotta be right next to me or it's not gonna think you're there. This is my monkey. This is my Matilda. She's a monkey. Are you Matilda? You gotta steal the show even when it's not your show, don't you?
Was there more that you wanted to specifically say about the book before we move on to movies?
Sure. One of the things I found interesting about the book, it was a lot more simplistic then having seen the movie, the 1996 movie first, I was expecting more because the movie does do more as far as the comeuppance at the end for Principal Trunchbull. So the book in a lot of ways was far simpler and not quite as complex, but it's a good book. It's still a good book. I will say that I feel like both the movie and the musical are better than the book. But they take the story just a little bit further and make it just a little better.
Yeah. And I feel like when he wrote it, things were not necessarily conceived of on the dynamic level that we can, like today, if you're telling a story, you tell it differently than you probably would have back then.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think that's part of it, that was sensational for its time, for a children's story to go that far or whatever. But we need more. we have gotten used to the more spectacular, if you've got this ability, what do you do with it? Revenge, like, you know what I mean? Like, yeah.
I think that's true.
The 1996 movie, I was 13, I guess, when that came out. Like, I'm trying to like do the math. I don't remember how old I was. I think it was 96. But I just remember loving that girl.
Mara Wilson?
Yeah. I just remember like Miracle on 34th Street, I think, and Mrs. Doubtfire and Matilda. Like, I just loved her. She was adorable to me.
Was.
And so
expressive, and she was so cute, and she did such a great job in all the little things that she did.
Yeah. And I felt like she was like the perfect little Matilda. I did kind of feel like it was weird that it was because the movie is set in America, and I knew that the book was like England or British Isles or whatever. There was some things that like it felt like the Trunchbull, especially several of the things that she says are weird in an American dynamic. Do you know what I mean? That was kind of nitpicky though, but I did love that movie for a long time. Like, they took out the parrot, how in the book she has like the parrot that she shoves in the, and I understood for time or just because that's too weird. Like, these days we would be like,
too, it's animal cruelty.
Yeah.
I was like, Matilda, that bird is stuck in there.
Yeah. And so I figured, okay, yeah, it makes sense that they took that out, but they had her like making the breakfast and like all the cute things. And like you said, like with the Trunchbull at the end, kind of getting her revenge on Trunchbull and that.
Yeah, the whole going into the house and like almost getting caught and then going back and pretending to be Magnus and the whole making the house feel haunted. I like that a lot. That was one of the things they added in the movie that I felt like really helped kind of build for the end.
Right. Yeah, I really liked that. And to me, it didn't it didn't pull away from the story of Matilda at all. I felt like that was perfectly within the same vein of the movie. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I will say that in the musical, which I love, I kind of love musicals anyway. I'm kind of hard pressed to find a musical that I don't like. They're out there, but few and far between. But no, I do love the musical, but how she talks about she's making up the story about the escapeologist.
Escapeologist. I've never heard it called that before. So that kept like cracking me up because it sounded like the weirdest thing to say. I'm like, yeah, maybe it's an English thing to say, but I think escape artist sounds better than escapeologist.
Yeah.
Okay. I was like, I thought maybe she made that word up, but then everyone else is acting like that's a real word. I'm like, that a word? That just sounds funky, but okay.
Maybe that's the UK's version of escape artist. I don't know.
I guess. Okay.
But yeah, that she was making up that whole story, and then it turned out to be Miss Honey's story. Like, I felt like that wasn't necessary. And while I wasn't upset because visually it's very dynamic, it speaks to her. She had to live in the stories, and so it kind of does speak to that she can create this crazy story, and then how does she know that it was Honey's story? Oh, she must have been using her powers, right? And didn't even know. Like, I get it,
Yeah.
but I felt like it didn't add anything to the story.
It takes away, actually. For sure.
Yeah, I loved the musical. I felt like they could have done away with that entirely,
Yeah.
and
I
it would have been excellent.
Yeah, I agree. So me and my film critic son, who's like can't watch anything without him being like, what? And then like he wants to stop in the middle of the movie and start critiquing it. We're like, no, it's the end of the movie. Give it a chance. Um, but we sat and talked about it, and then we watched some different reviews on it. And then one of the things we talked about when we were talking about it is that it kind of feels like having the story thing was cool when you thought it was her coming up with the story. And it was fun because you saw like things she was taking from what was happening to her and putting into her story. And that's something authors really do. So I identified with that and I was like, yeah, that's cool. That's exactly what authors do. And that's part of why a lot of people write, is to kind of get all those things out that they're dealing with, or the things that are important to them, and put it into something. So it was cool up until the point where they started introducing the stepsister personality, and then she comes to live with them and takes care of the girl. I'm like, that's Miss Honey's story. Are they changing Miss Honey's story? And they're like, nope, this is Miss Honey's story. And somehow you magically knew it. And it's like, wait, she got telekinesis. She's not telepathic. And if she's telepathic, how come it's only with Miss Honey and she had no clue? Like, it didn't make any sense. And it took away from what it seemed like she was doing with the story. It kind of took away Miss Honey telling her the story, and Miss Honey like opening up and sharing this, because this is hard for her to talk about. She doesn't tell people about this aspect of her life. Nobody else knows about this, you know? So that was a big thing for her to feel comfortable enough with Matilda to be able to share, hey, this is my life. It's pathetic, but I'm telling you, this child, this my horrible life story, because she identifies with this child.
Right.
She realizes that Matilda is very close, very similar to her, and comes from a family that doesn't appreciate her either. And that they're in a lot of ways very kindred spirits. But you don't get that in the musical because they ruined that. Just the selective, sudden telepathy. You know, they didn't really explain that, and it was just weird. So
yeah, that's exactly what I felt like too. So we watch anime. We watch quite a lot of different anime shows. And there are some that I like. I love this show, but there will be like filler seasons when like the main story arc is going along, and then they don't have, a lot of it's based on mangas that are written in Japan, like well before the anime starts. And so maybe they haven't caught up to the manga, or maybe for whatever reason they like are not continuing with that story. And so they'll have like an entire, sometimes just episodes, but sometimes entire seasons that I'm like, well, we can skip that entire season because it's just a filler season. I feel like that's how the story with the escapologist and the acrobat, I feel like that's what it is. Like, to me, if I were going to watch the movie again, I could skip over those parts and I still have a full story that I enjoy. None of the musical numbers that I can think of actually had anything to do with that story.
Yeah.
Like at one point, the dad does, the escapologist, he does come and pick her up, and like,
but they could have just done
whatever.
That for her dad when Miss Honey was telling her the story, because it was her dad. So they got yeah, definitely filler. I think also they put it in there to give it some more like grander scope, and so they can have like the circus stuff, and they could have like more grander, bigger things, which is fine if that's like in her imagination. But if it's not in her imagination, it's like, how likely is it that Miss Honey's parents would be an acrobat and an escapologist? And how likely is it that her stepsister is this crazy person, Miss Trunchbull? And like, how do these people meet? And like, where? Like, I don't know.
Why would she in that case start the school? That was actually a question that I was always like, why is this woman the headmistress of a school? And I get it, power, but you know, like power over these children or whatever. I get that.
Yeah.
But I'm like, really? Seems like torture to herself. But
maybe it works better in England. Maybe it's like a private school. I don't know how England works with schools and everything, but like here, everything's on a school district. Public schools are very organized, and they're very everything's overseen. So that kind of stuff couldn't happen because everything is very regulated and there's like a lot of accountability and a lot of like monitoring what everybody's doing. Whereas if it's a private school and in England, maybe, I don't know.
My kids go to charter schools and parents are so involved, both schools. I'm like, oh man, right. I'm glad that there's only 2 of you because they are expecting parents to volunteer at the school, volunteer at after school, like outside of school activities and whatever. If there's like tutoring, then they're like, when can you come and tutor? What subjects can you like parents are expected to be extremely involved.
This is not a subject which I can tutoring. Some people can do it.
If I was going to homeschool, I would do that. I'm not going to homeschool, you know.
Exactly. I decided it was better for you to do it than me.
But then I think of things like Harry Potter, and like that was a perfectly understandable dynamic. That like, oh yeah, you're a wizard. Of course you go to this school that's in another part of the.
You go away to school, you know? Which is much more common in Europe. That's not something so much we do here. And I have the hardest time wrapping my brain around sending my kid off someplace most of the school year. I was like, I have a hard time with just going for like 6 hours a day. Like it hurts me. Like I'm like, I don't know what's happening. And then they come home and tell me some stupid thing the teacher said or some like rude thing another kid said or did. And I'm like, I want to be like, no, you shall not talk to my children this way. And I'm just super mama bear kind of mom. But I'm like, I want to protect them in my little nest or whatever. So I couldn't imagine sending them off someplace and not seeing them half a year or more.
I'm not a boarding school mom.
I would go crazy. I'd be calling them all the time. Are you okay? Are you okay? Are you okay? I'd like be showing up at the school.
And I was thinking, so when I saw the movie, when I read the book, I was thinking like, how do the parents not know? Like when the kid like comes home with bruises all over their body. They addressed it in the book where Matilda's like, because it's too fantastic. Clearly,
it's too crazy.
You're just a kid making it up. You know, maybe the teacher yelled at the girl for something, and you're like, oh my gosh, she picked her up by the braids and flung her across the schoolyard. No, she didn't. You liar. You know, like.
Exactly. It's like, so yeah, they do point that out in the book where it's like, if you're gonna do something crazy, go big. Go big. Gonna do something bad. Don't do something small. Do something so outrageous nobody will believe that it actually happened.
Yep.
And that's true because you wouldn't believe that. But maybe also like she's a different person around the adults, you know? And like they just see her as like no nonsense, and she'll like, you know, straighten these kids up and really disciplined, and maybe they see that as a good thing. So some parents will be like, oh yeah, that'll be great. And then other parents will be like, no, I don't want my kids raised by going to school like it's a drill sergeant and they're in like boot camp.
Right.
But it depends on the parent, and it depends on how she behaves around the parents. Wormwood is kind of a sleazeball anyway, so he's not at all alarmed by the things she's saying and how she's like all disciplined and strict and scary. That's the whole reason he sends Matilda to that school, because she seems scary. So it's like, have none of these other parents met Miss Trunchbull? And also, like, parts of the movies, it almost seems like there are no other teachers. And even with the musical, like, you just see Miss Honey, and occasionally you might see somebody else floating around. And it's like, are there other teachers?
Right. They have like that kindergarten, first grade, whatever that is, the 5-year-old class. And then like the other students are there, but
Oh, the teachers are. Yeah. So I want to talk about the 1996 movie a little more. I appreciate the musical. I definitely feel like the movie is better, especially after watching it again, after watching the musical. So what I feel like they did better is it has the whimsy and like the fun and the personality of Matilda is there. I feel like in the musical, her personality is almost gone. She has almost no personality. She's more like, she's tougher and like, I get that, but it's like she's more of a just tough girl. I sympathize with her far less Maybe because she comes off more as like this vengeful and angry person instead of this like fighting for justice, trying to help people kind of person. She doesn't I don't know, somehow we lose a little bit of the sweetness and like the adorable parts of Matilda. Maybe it's also the
Right.
actress that's playing her. Maybe she's just not as adorable
Well,
as Mara was.
I don't remember, but she's older. She's like 12 or 13.
Yeah, they're still acting like their first year. She looks like she can maybe be like 9 or 10 at the youngest. Like she definitely not a 6-year-old.
With the book and also with the original movie, the 96 movie, um, she's clearly a little girl. And the Mrs. Phelps, I think it's Mrs. Like they're like, hey babe, why aren't you in school? And she's like, school. And then her parents are like, ah crap, here, throw her in this lady's school. She'll straighten her out, right?
Yeah.
Whereas in the musical, they do kind of point out like the superintendent or whatever of schools like comes
Mm-hmm.
by the house and they're like,
They're like,
so have
you
you been
notice.
homeschooling her?
Because that's something that would happen in
Yeah.
real life, but like after a while, somebody would be like, wait a second, we know you have a child this age and she's not in school. What's going on?
Yeah, they kind of explain that like, oh well, maybe she's a little older or whatever. But then the innocence is gone. I think that's something that the musical is missing.
Yeah.
That Mara Wilson, she just projects innocence. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Even when she's up
But
to no good, there was still like a sense of cute. Well, like, oh, she's just getting back at the bad lady. It's okay. Where
yeah.
like,
Yeah, and it almost feels deserved. Like not just
mhm.
that Trunchbull deserves it, but Matilda deserves. Like it even mentions that after that she doesn't have that power anymore. She doesn't need that power anymore.
Yeah, in the book, it was like the way they explained it was that her brain wasn't getting used, so all that because she was in like the little kids class and she wasn't able to use all her intelligence, so her brain had to do something. So it
Mm-hmm.
telekinesis. But then once she was in the older classes and was being mentally fulfilled, she didn't need
Right.
it anymore, which I thought was kind of a dumb.
Yeah.
Whereas like one of my kids was like, I think it's just that now she's happy and now she doesn't need it anymore. It was more it came from her being angry. And then she's happy with Miss Honey at the end. She doesn't need
Right. And that's how the movie makes it. The movie makes it more like that. And I appreciated that. Like they're like, once the parents are gone and she's happy with Miss Honey and she doesn't need that power anymore. And so it goes away.
yeah.
It's Mary Poppins, right? It
Yeah,
comes
it's like
until you don't need it. Is no longer capable, but it's no longer necessary. So
I need it. She does, unless she decides to become like a superhero and fight bad guys with telekinesis powers, which with somebody else's story. But
telekinesis. That's
tele-
what they say in the musical. You have
oh,
telekinesis. I loved that.
okay. I guess I totally missed that. I didn't hear him call it telekinesis. So yeah, what I liked about the 96 movie is that it has more of the whimsy and like I feel like it kind of brought out all the fun things about the book and made it just even better because
Right.
I liked Danny DeVito as the narrator. I liked the way they narrated it. I liked the way they gave us time to really get to know the family and her whole growing up, where they feel like they
Mm-hmm.
hyper sped that up in the musical. And I
Mm-hmm.
think also because they're trying to make up time because they're adding that story in there, the storytelling too.
Right.
Parents they're horrible, but you don't care so much in the musical because you don't get to know them really. And I kind of miss the brother. The brother adds
Right.
more to the movie, the first movie. Because he was kind of part of the like he was somebody for them to compare her to, and oh, she's not the boy, she's not as good as him, and he was like them and she wasn't, and there was some of that like sibling rivalry.
Mm-hmm.
So I enjoyed that. I missed that in the musical, but I could see why they got rid of it because again, they're cutting out a lot of things that actually were part of the story to make room for things that weren't.
In the 96 movie, the parents they're selfish, they're petty, they're shallow,
Mm-hmm.
and they're not well learned. They're not like educationally or academically driven.
Mm-hmm.
True enough, but also they seem like extreme versions, but could be real. Like, that one lady in the neighborhood that actually is that lady. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Whereas in the musical, they were so cartoonish. I was entertained by that. Like I said, I love it for its entertainment value.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's incredibly entertaining. I was thinking when you were talking about that you kind of missed having the boy, how in the beginning when they're talking about how like most parents love their children and think they're miracles, and they're singing the song about my mommy thinks I'm a miracle.
Yeah, that
And
song
then she's sitting, is very fun. But then she's sitting there in the office, like clearly pregnant.
no,
And when they say you're pregnant, she goes, "I'm not listening. This is quackery." She's like, "I'm not pregnant." Yeah. So it made sense in the musical that they don't have two kids because these people would not have two kids.
yeah.
Whereas in the book and in the 96, they have a boy and they love him and he's like just like them. And then they have a girl and she's so weird and different that they're like, ugh.
Yeah, they probably just like, oh yeah, let's have a little girl. That'll be great. But then she's nothing like them.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right that they're very cartoonish. And there are things I thought were funny about them. And I did like the whole where she went and messed up their room and like messed with his hair thing, and then she climbs out the window and onto the roof, and it goes down to the skylight. And so like when he comes running in, she's already asleep. I thought that was clever. A bit dangerous, but then I was like, wait a second, I climbed on the roof of my house all the time growing up. So I could imagine my kids doing that, but I did it. So I felt like the musical had too many songs. And there were some songs that were really good and I really liked, and there were other songs that I thought were incredibly annoying. Like they were trying to shove as many words as possible into the song.
Yes.
Trying to sound clever. They're trying too hard. There were some songs where it worked. Like the one where they first go to the school and they're doing the ABC. Like the first time they went through it, I didn't like it. But then the second time when they did show that it was an ABCs were happening within the song, I was like, oh, okay, it is clever. But I liked it when I realized what they were doing. And then there's some other songs in there that are like, they're not bad songs. It just feels like it's filler. Like you don't necessarily need that song. Like there's too many songs. There's some that are really, really good though, that I really liked.
Yeah. So some of them made no sense to me. Like I liked the coming to the school song, especially when like your first day at school and you're just overwhelmed and people are like, mind this rule and mind this rule and you got to do that, and you're like, whoa. I've had that experience many a time. I'm like, wait, I will learn quickly, but not right away.
Talk slower.
When the kid is eating the cake, what's his name? Bog Trotter,
yeah. Bruce Bog Trotter.
Yeah, when he's having to eat the whole cake, like the whole thing was that she was like, this is not like, you're not going to be cheering, you are silent. Like the rest of them start to like laugh at one point or something, and when he burps and they all start to laugh and she's like, silence, and she's like making them all sit there. And in the movie, like at one point Matilda's like, you can, and she's
that, like rouse everybody else to support him, and like that's a powerful moment in that movie. Like
right.
And I feel like that whole scene is better in the 96 movie than it is in the musical. Yeah. The song and like the choreography and everything they did was really cool and really well done. But it takes away from the tension.
Right.
And you're more focused on what they're doing and dancing than like him actually eating the cake.
Right. And part of the purpose behind that in the story was that they wanted to speak out. They wanted to be on his side, but he was alone. And kind of that's what she does. She isolates you, she makes it so that everyone is so scared that when she points you out, that everyone else is too afraid. Do you know what I mean? And in that case, when half of the cafeteria is going, he can do it, and the other half is going, he's gonna spew or whatever it was, like, then it's just a normal school with a kid eating way too much cake. Like, it didn't fit.
Power. Like my kids asked, so what is the point of this punishment? He takes cake, so she gives him cake. And so I was trying to explain to him, it's like the notion is that they do something bad, like you make them do that thing so many times that they become so sick of it that they never want to do it again. And so that's what like the theory behind it is that he'll hate chocolate cakes the rest of his life. He's never gonna eat chocolate cake again. He's never gonna steal it again. Like she's, taught him his lesson. But of course it backfires because it turns into this big triumph thing. One, apparently this kid can really like put it away. Like he can put food away, like that's amazing. Um, and then secondly, everybody kind of rallies behind him and it becomes more of like a, oh, look what I can do. And so it totally backfires on her. And I always loved that scene. I thought it was really cool. Plus, in the 1996 one, I really think that cake looks amazing, but I'm a chocolate person.
Oh my gosh.
So I'm like, I want that cake myself. I'm like, I would steal that cake if I were him. I'd be like, what are we getting at that cake? And it was a huge cake. It wasn't even like a small cake. It was like this giant cake. So even like the little slice that she gave him was actually more like regular size cake size, like on its own. It's huge. So it's like really impressive that he eats this huge cake. And then in the musical, they make like 3 layers. And it's like, whoa, yeah, that's a really big cake. But it didn't look anywhere near as yummy as the other one.
Right. Well, and again, it's the cartooniness of it.
Yes.
Like it's like when you watch a cartoon and they're like, oh, this cake, no. But yeah, like once again, it like pulls you out of because in the 96 movie, you feel like this is possible. Like this is crazy and extreme, but like they say, like don't do anything by half measures. If you're going to be crazy, be so crazy that no one believes when you're told on,
Yeah.
And she is. And the cake in the 96 is exactly what is described in the book. The at least 18 inches round, and it was like this big honking, like, it was exactly what you would expect to see from reading the book. Costco and Sam's Club, they both have those like crazy big chocolate cakes. And like we will get those and I'm like, I love them so much, and we cut the thinnest little slices and I struggle to finish them because they're so rich and they're so intense. But I love them. I'm like, I will just keep this with me and I'll eat it over the course of the next hour and a half. Don't touch my stuff,
Yeah, I love the rich chocolate cakes.
And then you watch the musical and it's so comically large that it makes for a good show. Again, it is super entertaining, but clearly not real.
Yeah.
Clearly this is a fantasy story. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so
it kind of takes everything to the fantastical, like just a little bit more, and it is more cartoony, and it is, but again, that's because we're dealing with the musical here. That's what's interesting about this, is that you go from translating from a book into a film, you're going to have certain things that change, and then transferring even from a regular film to a musical is a whole nother animal. So the thing about film is very personal because you can be there and you can see like the subtleties of people's reactions and what they're feeling, and you can be like right up in their face. But with a musical, especially if it's on stage, everything got to be bigger because the whole audience has got to see it, and you're not going to see the up close. You're not going to get the subtleties. And especially when you're having to deal with, you have all these musical numbers and you've got to do all this interesting choreography. Everything becomes bigger and like just like huge. So like you lose all the subtleties. Like it's very hard to do anything that is muted or really like small in a musical. Like even when they do dramatic things, it's still like big and huge. So it's like nothing's small.
Yeah, they're theatrical.
It's theatrical. It is out there. It is big. And so definitely the musical does that. It takes it to like the next level and makes it really big. And there's scenes about that I like, but like other things that I don't so much. So
I'm trying to remember the number one complaint that I have about most musicals is that Act 1 is like chock-a-block, like everything is a song. It's practically an operetta. They're like, oh, I took a step outside my door. Good morning, Baltimore. Oh, I did another thing. Blah, blah, blah. Sing another song. Like every single thought and action gets its own song. And then Act 2, like everything after the intermission on stage, right? And there's like a reprise and an end number.
Yeah.
the big ensemble number at the end, and I'm like, what just happened here? And I didn't I didn't get that from this movie necessarily. Um, which like I'm trying to think of other good examples of that, because it really does bother me, and it is very common.
I can see what you're saying. Yeah.
But I just can't think of anything right now, because what I'm thinking of is Matilda. But I felt like, at least like you said, maybe there was superfluous songs in there. I think that's the right word I mean to use.
Uh-huh.
Sometimes I use a word and then I realize I don't know if that's actually what I meant.
Sure if that was the right word, but
Right.
what
The extras that weren't necessary, like the escapologist, not necessary.
Yeah.
The cake song, not necessary. Always trying to cram like either people singing over each other, or
And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. Like
right.
it's really a balancing act. I think the song about When I Grow Up it was cute, but it wasn't necessary. It didn't
Yeah.
really, especially since most of the things they talk about, I'm like, that's funny because but all the things are things you don't do when you grow up. So
Right. Well, I did kind of like that. That's what kids think. Like,
yeah.
when I grow up, because I had those kind of things. You know what I always heard other kids say was, they would say, when I'm a mom, I'm not gonna do blah, blah, blah. When I have kids, blah. And I, like, even as a kid, I was like, I don't know what the heck I'm gonna do if I'm ever a mom. I don't know. Like, jury is out on that. Like, I always thought it was funny that like kids were always when I grow up. And now here I am, I'm almost 40 years old, and I still am like, you know what, when I grow up, I think it'll be cool. I do kind of have that mentality that, like, you know what, when I'm grown up, I'm going to eat whatever I want, and then I'm grown up and I'm like,
Oh, you can't do that? Crap.
oh. Turns out I don't want anymore.
It hurts.
I did feel like the song went too long. And that sometimes can be a problem too. Maybe there's not too many songs necessarily, but they go for freaking ever.
Too long.
Yeah, that's something that I've learned with. So, like I said, I've got girls. I've got 4 daughters between the ages of 9 and 17 currently. And we have watched about every musical that exists on any of the streaming services.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like, we've watched so many, and they're all into that. They're all into different ones, but they are all into musicals of some sort. I like to blame myself for that.
Mm-hmm.
And they
Totally.
I've noticed that with a lot of these, that I'm like, 2 minutes of this was fine. 3.5, 4 minutes of this, move along. Like,
yeah. So yeah, like sometimes a song can go on too long, and the whole thing we're talking about with the reprise. Again, my kids, they sort of they asked about that when we're watching the musical. I guess it's been a while since we watched the musical, or they just haven't noticed this before. But they noticed how they kept bringing up the Little Bit Naughty song, and they're like, "Why are we hearing that song again?" And so my husband was explaining to them how, well, this is how it usually works in a musical. You have the main song, and then you have a reprise, and then you have like the finale, and it'll come back again, and that's normal in a musical. And if you don't know musicals, that's going to seem weird. But if you do, then it's, that's just part of it. Like, it'd be interesting to actually go back and check and see how many songs there really were. And if it's just that there are too many songs or just too long of songs. You might have a point there. So
either way, I feel like that could have been streamlined. However, like I said before, super entertained by it. I think kind of overall, I love the story, the book. I feel like it's kind of limited to the time that it was written in.
yeah.
But I still like it. It's still very sweet. It's all of my girls have read it. They'll probably read it to their kids. I don't know. But I still think the like pivotal, if you want the story and you're not going to read it, if you had to choose and you wanted a good like understanding of Matilda, go with the 96 movie. You're done in an hour and a half or whatever it is, and you get the story and you know what people are talking about, and
yeah.
I still feel like it's worth reading the actual book. I always feel like it is. But when you're reading, you choose. You know what I mean? When you're reading and you read long dark hair, like for me, I would think of my hair because right now it is long and it is dark,
Yes.
and like there are like drawings in the book to kind of give you some kind of reference, because I would not have totally understood Trunchbull's aesthetic, but
Yeah.
then I see her drawn out a couple of times and I'm like, oh, I get it. I can decide how fantastic or how mundane a situation is being guided by the written thing. Whereas when you're watching a movie, what you see is what you get. Like
Yeah.
that's what it is.
Yeah.
But the most entertaining by far is the musical. I could just watch that, not even caring about plot holes or whatever. It's just entertaining.
Yeah. It was very well done. I have to give them credit for that. It's very beautiful. It's very well done. The musical numbers are well done as far as like how it's orchestrated. The choreography as well. It's very well done. Um, I liked Emma Thompson as Trunchbull. I didn't think I would. It was like it took me a second to be like, oh, that's Emma Thompson, and she did a great job. She was very funny. As the bad guy, there were moments took me out like, okay, so you don't know, like they're doing the whole obstacle course part in the musical. And she's trying to
Mm-hmm.
like break their spirits, and she has them doing the obstacle course, and there's like bombs blowing
Mm-hmm.
up, and like that was funny. I liked that was like extra, like she's trying to punish them, and I did like that
Mm-hmm.
aspect of the musical that it took it to another level.
Mm-hmm.
But there was a part where she's yelling at Matilda, and Matilda's like, "I'll sing a song like about when they say red and you see red and blah blah," and like then you see the wind swirling and everything, and then all of a sudden she's like, "And it's quiet," and she's off floating in a balloon. I
Mm-hmm.
get what they're going for, but that took me out of it because it was like building to something, and then all of a sudden it took me out of the moment. Or over here floating about, and they get there trying to
Yeah.
say that she like found her center or something, but that was weird. And then there's the other part where Miss Trunchbull's singing her song before, and suddenly it's like, "Oh, don't let them take your horses away," and she has her whole she's on the swing. It was funny and it was weird. But at the same time, I was like, I can
Yeah.
do without that, but it did make me giggle.
Yeah.
It was
Well,
the two
and
weirdest things
so
that happened.
there are some times when you see it being like just too fantastical that I go, is that Matilda's perspective? Like,
Mm-hmm.
was it just a normal cake and she saw this crazy cake?
Yeah, yeah,
Was it just a normal obstacle course in the rain and she was like imagining that this woman is crazy and she's like blowing up whatever? Like,
yeah.
there was some of that, but then there was also times that they're just like, no, this is just how it is. And you're like, oh,
Okay.
okay. Like, yeah, times that you like don't know what you're supposed to be thinking.
Mm-hmm.
And when they went into that whole like everything is quiet and she like takes herself out of the storm. So, not that I have a terrible lot of experience with this, but I do that. Like, when things are coming against me, especially when you are literally in my face, like yelling at me, I don't know what you said. It's almost like I can't hear you anymore. My ears will start to ring and I can't pay attention to you anymore. I
Mm-hmm.
might be looking at your face, but I don't see you anymore. And so I do kind of get what they're getting at with that song, but it does kind of pull you out of the story. Like you're expecting it to be like, oh, boom, and then it's like, oh, and then I threw a cup at her head or whatever. And you're like, okay, I guess that
Yeah,
works, you
yeah,
know. But the other thing that I thought was weird was that like you knew where you were with the 96 film.
mm-hmm.
You knew it was a little bit lighthearted. It touched on some pretty tragic things like
Yeah.
parents that don't love you and
Abusive
and
teachers.
yeah, but also you knew what story you were in, you know.
Mm-hmm.
The musical was lighthearted and over the top silly and
Yeah,
then super intense and she's
yeah,
dealing with psychological like it it fluctuated so dramatically that it was sometimes kind of hard to stick with it, because you're like, well, that's a deep issue that, oh, nope, we're
pretend
okay.
it didn't happen.
And now we're back to dancing around a cake, I guess,
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for me that I agree with you. I think the biggest thing that made it intense and made it darker was the girl that played Matilda. I feel like she didn't come off as lighthearted or innocent or pure or sweet at all. She came off as very intense.
Right.
Like, she was like the whole time. And I think that's part of what made the difference.
Yeah.
It might be kind of a silly, somewhat whimsical story, but the way in which it's told made it darker, which is funny for a musical to make it seem darker. But it's a musical. Musicals are generally bright.
It's generally the light version of the story.
Light and silly, and they're just for fun.
Even in like the Demon Barber of Fleet Street, right? What is that?
A Sweeney Todd.
Sweeney Todd. Thank you. I could remember the tagline and not the
actual close name. Enough. You have remembered the name.
Right. But yeah, even in Sweeney Todd, it is a dark story. It is disturbing. And yet the musical aspect kind of oddly lightens it. Like,
a little bit.
Enough that I can enjoy it. If that was a drama, if I was watching a not musical, dramatic film adaptation of Sweeney Todd, it would just be all the way through. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so typically, if you're like, oh yes, there's this dramatic enactment of the story and there's this musical enactment of the story, the musical is the lighthearted one, and it can get away with poking in at a little bit of dark stuff, but it swings back to the lighthearted nature. And I felt like Danny DeVito, he's one of those that, like, even when you're like, he's the penguin, right? And yet for some reason, so I just pulled that out of in the way back of my brain.
The way back, really?
Okay. The way back of my brain. But like, even gross, like when he plays like just like, for some reason he has that perfect balance of like dark, villainous, gritty, and at the same time kind of a weird, whimsical,
weirdly likable,
Yeah. And I suddenly forgot her name. Wife.
Perlman?
Yeah. So normally, like, I don't know, for some reason, like normally I would be like, I hate it when people portray moms as just like selfish and like, oh, I'm a housewife, I can do whatever I want. But that actually was this character, and I felt like she did that really well. Like, you know what I mean?
And it kind of reminded me of Peggy Bundy a little bit.
Yeah.
So like, I think that I got that vibe, and it cracked me up.
Yeah.
I do love how in the 96 movie she kept saying they're cops, and she's like, they're speedboat salesmen. She's like, they're cops.
Right.
And it was really funny that the little girl sees what's going on. But I did like how Matilda actually kind of covered for her dad the one time, where she like caught the cops trying to snoop around in the garage, and she like makes it so that they can't get to the parts, and then she distracts them. It's like, oh, your car is rolling down the street, and she steals the tape. And I thought, that's nice. So she, even though her parents are messed up, her dad is crooked, she's still like, if you're gonna get my dad, you gotta do it appropriately, at least. Like, you can't be a crook too. So you've got to do it right. And she's sort of looking out for him. I loved Danny DeVito as the dad. I loved him as a narrator, and he's also the director and co-producer. So I thought that was really cool. And I feel like he understood the story and he got the story. And I don't know, I just feel like overall that really works.
Apparently used to pull Mara aside and just be like, how are you feeling? Was I too mean or whatever? Like he would kind of make sure that she was feeling okay, so that she didn't have like negative feelings about him or about the production or whatever, which I thought was incredibly sweet. That he was like, hey, bud, you know,
No, I'm just pretending to be this mean guy. I'm actually really nice.
right. So yeah, that is really sweet. I don't know anything about the actors that played the parents in the musical,
Yeah.
but I loved the mom's, again, cartoonish, not real.
Oh, she's all, yeah.
Yeah, like everything that I kept laughing at her, and my kids are like, "What?" I'm like, "I don't know. There was no joke. It's just fun." But like I said, I quoted it a little bit earlier. But when she's sitting there and she's like, "This is quackery," like when she said that, for some reason, I busted up laughing, and my kids are like,
Yeah.
"What?"
White trash English.
Yeah, I've just never heard that term, and I don't know. It was just funny to me. Like I was like, that's so funny. I was very entertained that they portrayed them so over the top,
Mm-hmm.
but I appreciated better the DeVito Perlman parents' portrayals.
Yeah.
Like I could believe that those parents existed
Yeah.
to a degree. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So
I like
yeah.
how they still had that scene that was in the book where Miss Honey comes to the house and is
Mhm.
trying to tell him how exceptional she is and like how she wants to help her. And they had that whole conversation where like she's like, "Oh, don't look down your nose at educated people. If like you got sick for some reason, you would have to go to a hospital and your doctor would be a college educated person. And if somebody sued you for selling a faulty car, your lawyer would be college educated."
Mhm.
And I love that whole exchange because it was very interesting in the book. It's also a great moment for the mom character because she's like, "Oh, you chose books, I chose looks. Look at
Yeah.
me." And like,
Yeah.
really, if you look at her, you're like, "Yeah, look at you."
Yeah.
You act like I should be envying you, but really, no. But she
Yeah.
thinks she's got it all figured out.
Right.
It
Well,
just
and
shows you how like obtuse and how self-involved, how out
mhm.
of touch with reality they are.
Yeah. Well, and I know, so I know that kind of one of the themes of the book is that they're bad, honey's good. And generally, that's true. But I also liked in that exchange that, like, Miss Honey, she was not happy about the whole Trunchbull situation, but she was happy with the life that she chose. She was happy to be a teacher, to be trying to do better. She enjoyed being well educated and
Mm-hmm.
whatever, you know. And even if she wasn't as well educated as she might have liked to have been, like she was happy with the choices that she made in her life.
Yeah.
And so were the Wormwoods. The Wormwoods were happy with the life that they chose.
Yeah.
And it meant that they had to run away because they're skeevy, but you know what I mean?
Yeah.
They were happy with that. And I kind of like that. I look at my kids and I'm like, I've got four very different personalities in my house that like I can see where like I was never good at school. I did okay, but I tended to make friends with the right teachers so that they would go a little bit easy on me or they let me retake the test or whatever. And then if there's a teacher that I just couldn't get along with, I would do just well enough that I passed the class and I could get out of there, you know. Academics was not my strong suit. And school settings was never easy for me, right?
Mm-hmm.
However, I love what I love. Like I love learning to do a new thing. The job that I have right now, I am it's at a printing company where I'm like a design layout assistant. I don't know. But that's not something that ever did I like think like I'm going to go into design or whatever. And they were like, "Well, this is the position we need." And so I'm like, "Okay, well then how do I get the learning?" And so I took a course that I never considered taking before. And now I do that as my job, you know?
Cool.
And it's just like when I want to learn it, I can do very well, you know? And so I kind of feel like the Wormwoods have a little bit of that. Like Matilda will say, like, "You're very clever. If you could use that cleverness honestly, like you might be even a better businessman, you know?"
Yeah.
And he's like, "No, no, I don't want to use it that way." Like, you know,
Yeah.
he's
No.
like, "Nope, car full of soda." Here I come, you know.
Yeah.
And but they were happy with the choices that they made.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of liked that she had her moment to be like that, to be like, you chose that, I chose this. I feel like I did better.
Yeah.
Even if Miss Honey would have been miserable in that situation.
Yeah.
But if she had to do what Miss Honey did, she would have been miserable in that situation, you
Exactly.
know?
It's
Kind
like
of just that moment of like, it takes all kinds.
different people are going to go different routes and everyone's going to find
Yeah.
their right route. But where, the person that we're most concerned about is Matilda. And right now, Matilda is headed down a road that she doesn't want to go. And that's where
Right.
having Miss Honey show up in her life is sort of a godsend because she needs someone who's going to nurture that side of her and going to understand that and is going to take her on that road she wants to go. She's not going to get there with the Wormwoods. So if she stayed with them, it would have never worked out. And she wouldn't have gotten anywhere until she, ran away or was old enough to move out. And then she would finally get to do what she wanted to do. Not that she was waiting around. She was going off to the library at like 4 by herself, so she was going to find a way to learn the stuff and to do what she wanted to do, even with them. But having someone to love and support her, that understood her, that got her, definitely made it that much easier, made it so she could get there where she wanted to be sooner.
Kind of that concept that like they did make their choices and now it's not about them anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Once there's a kid in the picture, and that's another thing that I feel like the musical kind of answers a little bit, that like the parents were like, no, we're not pregnant, and if we are pregnant, it's a boy. And then they're like, in fact, you are pregnant, here's your baby girl,
Oh.
and they were like, what? We didn't choose this, which is silly because they did. But, like, now it's not about them anymore. And they were not making choices for not that. You know what I mean? Like they were still in the mentality of it is about me though. This is still my life. And Miss Honey, she was making choices, but she was always considering the children in her class and eventually specifically Matilda.
Mm-hmm.
That like you kind of look at it and like, well, she's a better mom than her own mother, and that's true.
Yeah.
And you can see like the like almost angst maybe of like, I didn't want to stop living for me,
Mm-hmm.
but I know parents that might be kind of like that.
I
Never as extreme as in the Matilda story, but
know. Yeah. It's all
mm-hmm.
nice to like be nostalgic about when you were younger and when it was just you. But if her parents had been actually experiencing that life with her, if they'd actually been nurturing her and like really loving her and getting to know her and sharing their life with her, they would have grown so much more from being a parent than they were on their own. And they would have loved her. They would have loved that life. They would have realized how much more they had with her in their life. And what's funny is that these guys are all about making money. If they were smart, they would have figured out that she was a genius and they would have been like, let's take her to Vegas. She could have her own show. She was like making things fly everywhere. Like in the 96 one, I love that scene where she's practicing how to do everything and she's moving everything around. That's a great scene. I love that scene. But yeah, it's like these guys, they actually hit the jackpot with this kid and they totally don't appreciate her, But like they're really, they're the ones that suffer the most from it because they lose their daughter. They lost the opportunity to grow with people and they end up having to leave her behind. But they're so self-centered, they don't see that. But she was probably the best thing that ever happened to them.
Yeah.
They were given a gift.
So okay, when I would watch the movie when I was younger, at the end when the narrator, the dad, is like saying like they finally did something for Matilda, right? They the best thing they could have ever done. By asking her or by letting her say, do you want this? And they do that in the musical too, where he like says like, well, do you want to stay?
Is that what you want?
The few people that I talked to about that, like, that doesn't even make sense. I'm like, it kind of does though, because first of all, the concept that they are capable of growth, even if they take a long time to get there, but also it's kind of a great escape for them. Like, oh, wait, you want this? So it's not just me being a bad person. You want to be off my shoulders,
You kind of hope that there's the element of, they're like, wait a second, this is my daughter. Like, it never really occurred to me not to have her. Like, even if I don't understand her, even if she frustrates me, like, this is still my kid. Can I really just leave her? And like, I think it's partially like you really want this, and it's also like, do I really want this? Is this really what I want? Like, that hesitation, that moment where they're like, am I gonna miss her? But if this is what she wants, wouldn't that just be better? I think there's an element of both. I do like how in the musical they had him finally call her his daughter. Like, that's my daughter. And she's like, you just call me your daughter? Because he's called her a boy this whole time. So you get that moment where he's like, wait a second. This is happening too fast. Do I really want to get rid of her?
Right.
And you can see a little bit of his hesitation, but like, if this is what she wants, it's ultimately like, well, if this was what you want, and you'll be happier, and honestly, I'll be happier. Like, it's kind of a weird situation where like you can kind of see a little bit of a moment of growth, but it is the right thing.
Right. Yeah, and that's why I say, like, they are even the worst people are capable of growth, and sometimes it takes them getting to that precipice of like taking her away. Like, they're always pushing her away or disregarding her, but
then when they want her to go with them, she doesn't want to come.
Yeah, like, and they, whether it is selfishness or whether it is a moment of clarity or whatever, or whether it's a little bit of both, I kind of like that humans are complicated, and I kind of like that they have that moment, that they get that moment. And Roald Dahl, but in a lot of his books he does that. A lot of his stories are like, these people were all children once. Trunchbull, she's like, I was never a little girl.
I'm so glad I was never one. They're like,
that's
not possible. You can't be a child.
That's not the way the science works. But like in all of his stories, there is that moment where you're like, all of you were once children, and then you became an awful adult. What happened to you? And I kind of see a little bit of that. Like, you see in Trunchbull, she just like, nope, I was never a child. I never like this. I hate them. And you almost see like a sense of like jealousy, maybe. Like, all of his characters are based on people that he saw around him. And so apparently there was someone who just seemed to legitimately hate children, almost seemingly like in a jealous way. And like, if I can't have what you have, then you're not getting it anymore. I will take it from you, even if I can't enjoy it. You know what I mean? And then with the parents, they were children. I don't know what kind of children. Maybe selfish, maybe normal, maybe they were sweet kids. And they became selfish to the point that they almost couldn't see it anymore. And they had to have that moment where growing up means being better. You know what I mean? And Miss Honey seems to be kind of Matilda-esque. Like you said, she kind of identifies with Matilda a little bit, in that she always wanted to be a good person, even when she didn't really have any good examples of a good person. But there was just innate goodness within her. You know what I mean?
Yes.
I will say, aesthetically, the 96 Honey fit the book's description to a T.
Yeah.
And I understand the concept that maybe the other Honey is just an excellent singer. Maybe they're trying to make it more diverse. There's 1,000 different reasons that they might have chosen who they chose. But all of my kids were like, really fit. Like, she does fine.
Okay as a character. And I did buy that there was a bond between her and the Matilda in that movie. I bought that. But yeah, like, I agree. Like, the actress that played Miss Honey in the 96 movie, She was very good at being that very genteel character and, almost timid, but very sweet and
Mm-hmm.
very kind. And I loved how in that version, when Miss Trunchbull came in, they had to hide all the fun things they were doing, all the colorful
Like
things.
flip over, yeah.
I thought that was really clever that she was still doing those things. She wasn't not doing them, but she was going to hide it from her. So like
Mm-hmm.
she could still teach her class the way she wanted to, but still keep Trunchbull happy.
Right.
I thought that was really clever. I thought that was cool. For Matilda, Miss Honey represents the kind of person she could become if she doesn't take a stand, if she doesn't stand up for herself. Because here's an adult who has lived a life very similar to hers, never stood up for herself, and now, even as an adult, is still not standing up for herself, who's still more or less living under the control of somebody else. And I think that is like her fear to not be able to live her life. And I think
Mm-hmm.
meeting Miss Honey and realizing that about her, that she doesn't want to become that person, but then she also wants to help Miss Honey, who never learned to stand up for herself. And I think that's like catharsis for her to be like, it's time. I can do this. I can do this for you. I can do this for us. I can stand up for myself. Because for the most part, she hasn't stood up for herself all the time. She's put up with all this crap. And she did
Mm-hmm.
little like sneaky things behind their backs to sort of punish them. But she wasn't like straight up saying no. She wasn't really standing up for herself. And I feel like
Right.
that's where Miss Honey is the interesting parallel for Matilda. And at the same time, for Miss Honey, here's Matilda, who's so brave and but so smart. And like, if this little girl can do this, I can do this, and then they sort of become the anchor and the strength for each other. And I really love that dynamic, that relationship. I think that's at the heart of the
Mm-hmm.
book. It's really beautiful. And I love seeing them come together. So, any final thoughts before we wrap?
No, I mean, I kind of already said what, so I think that if you're not going to read it, that's fine. The 96 version, Danny DeVito's version, I think that it tells the story excellently, and it's dynamic enough that it makes for good film.
Mm-hmm.
Um
I think it's what you
it
want a
hit
children's film to be. It's fun.
right.
It talks about hard hitting things, but in a very lighthearted way. So it's a great experience.
Yes. I think that the musical, I was extremely entertained by it. I wouldn't want people to feel like they got the story. You do lose something in the feel of the story, in the themes and the parable almost. Like, that's not the word I'm looking for, but that's the word that I'm thinking of. Like, the lesson that it's trying to teach you
The
gets a
meaning.
little lost.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's a really interesting story, and I can see why people like it and why it captured somebody's imagination and why it appeals to your
Mhm.
daughters. And, it's cute. So that's it for Matilda. Next time, it's my turn to pick. We're going to do Sherlock Holmes by Arthur Conan Doyle, specifically The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes and the Memoirs of Sherlock Holmes. And we will be watching the 2009 Guy Ritchie film, Sherlock, starring Robert Downey Jr. and Jude Law. And we're going to have a guest. We're going to have my husband, Johnny Craddock, on. So this will be interesting. It'll be our first book to movie guest and not an author guest. But yeah, so that's what we'll do next time.
Besides our children.
Not a children guest or children guest. It's our first adult guest about a book. Yeah. Anyways, so that sound good to you?
Sounds great.
All right. Sounds good. Okay, so for Paperback Books, I'm Ruth Craddock.
I'm Rae Davidson.
And we'll see you guys next time. Bye.